G'day viewers, the end of another week means it's time once more for Totally Fucked Up Friday. A little roundup of stuff around the world that proves, yeah, the world's totally fucked up. I actually want to start with kind of good news, bit of comeuppance for a serious fucked up individual that was in Australia this week. He goes by the name of Julien Blanc, and I am willing to bet that his birth name is closer to Joe Bloggs, but he thinks Julien Blanc looks cool. He's a pickup artist, and with all the sad self-hate that implies. Now, generally these pickup artists, you know, with the game and the negging, just seems sad and pathetic to me. It's like, really? You're going to manipulate a woman into having sex with you by lying and abusing and making her feel bad? Well, that's the path to happiness right there. And you'll end up alone, bitter, alcoholic and full of self-loathing, but you go for that shit. But this guy's actually several measures worse than that. Like, when I actually saw some of his material, stuff he says, material he circulates, I had trouble understanding how he is not in jail. He actively advocates violent assault. He laughs about assaulting women, literally posting pictures, choking women around the world, grabbing women's head and forcing them into his crotch. It's because, you know, way! That's just good fun. That's all that is. Anyway, he had just started a tour of Australia to share his secrets with horrible, sad fucks. And I shouldn't be quite so harsh, because look, honestly, it's not like I am, He-Man, Master of the Universe. I have never felt particularly comfortable in social circumstances. I am lucky enough to be in a truly awesome long-term relationship, and I don't have to worry about this dating bullshit. But I was never good at it. So I get if you feel bad, I get if you feel insecure, but my tip, don't listen to someone who tells you how to abuse women to get your way. It's just a little tip. You know, some people might call that rocket science, but my number one rule, when I used to do the internet dating advice with Mistress M, number one rule, and this always worked for me, don't be an asshole. You don't actually have to be spectacularly good, but if you start with don't be an asshole, you're ahead of a significant chunk of your opposition. Food for thought. Anyway, young Julien Blanc in Australia to share his wisdom with some possibly misguided, possibly severely assholish males, and he started to hit roadblocks when people started lobbying the venues he booked, saying, do you realise what this guy is? And they showed him his actual material, and the venue went, I'm not sure we want to be associated with someone who so actively advocates for violent abuse. And so he was getting shut out of all the venues, which was ruining his little plans. And he was in Melbourne last night, and it turns out what he did was hire a boat for a river cruise for his little speech. And they did get protested against at their launching point, which was in St Kilda. But then they went down the Yarra River in the South Bank near the city, and people found them there and started chanting at the boat, and apparently made the guys inside feel quite scared, which is more than one person suggested. If that sort of in-your-faceness makes you insecure and unsafe, maybe fucking bear that in mind when someone tells you to assault women. Maybe that's a bad feeling. Anyway, that apparently continued to whatever conclusion, even though when the riverboat people found out what it was about, because they'd been lied to, they wanted nothing to do with it. Cops showed up. So yeah, if you happen to read any reports, and I have seen people circulating this, like, oh, they used tampons at the boat, they pissed on the boat. There were cops there. Anyone who says those bad things happened is a fucking liar. They shouted, and quite possibly the people in the boat felt intimidated, but considering they were specifically going to learn how to intimidate and threaten women, I don't feel a fuck ton of sympathy for them. This sort of stuff is bullshit and needs to stop. It's not like women are perfect. It's not like all men are horrible. But this shit is unacceptable. Oh, and he left the country. The police reported today he actually left the country because the police released a statement saying, I'm glad there are people speaking out against this sort of shit, because it's bad when someone's objectified like this and really negative behaviour is encouraged. And they said, oh, by the way, they're not saying they had a word with him, but apparently he's left the country. No word if anyone desperate enough to pay in advance for his little speeches will get a refund. Not something I give a shit about. So just little fringe guys like, oh, what should you worry about that? We have actual people in the government. Senator Cory Bernardi, who I've gone on about before because he is one of the absolute worst people in the Liberal Party. And again, just around the world, capital L Liberal in Australia is the major Conservative Party here. Confusing, I know. Let's move on. But this guy is a piece of shit. He's one of these people who gives Christians a bad name. He gives his position of, this is what I regard to be a Christian as, so therefore I want to make homosexuality illegal, birth control, abortion, women's rights. I think he even wants to make divorce illegal. But basically, he wants to control what other people do because his magic man in the sky told him and he knows better. And a story came out this week. There was a seminar in Queensland about domestic abuse. Some of the women's refuges and crisis centres are being overwhelmed. They're not even able to answer all the calls they've got. It's gotten so bad, if a woman calling them hasn't already suffered broken bones, they're having to say, you're not as serious as the other cases we're mentioning. And one of the women highlighted a case where she said a guy got out essentially a restraining order against his partner, saying she bit him under the arm. The woman from the refuge points out the only way this guy is getting bitten under the arm is if he has the woman in a headlock. To which Cory, Mr. Enlightened Bernardi, says, well, police put bad, dangerous, violent criminals in headlocks. I'd say there's times when a husband should have his wife in a headlock. And he sees nothing wrong with this. Okay? Brief aside. I know there are women who abuse men, okay? I've seen this firsthand. I know it happens. To suggest that your first go-to thing when someone who deals with women in these situations every day says, this is the bullshit we face, to go, bitch deserved it, and then to question their credibility, which did wind up a Green senator who essentially said, shut the fuck up, Bernardi. They are an expert. You are a fucking tool. But when people like this are in positions of power and are trying to affect government policy, that's when you have to really take this shit seriously. Because these fucked up people just want to do blanket statements. You know what? If men just still got to control everything like the good old days, everything would be perfect. And seriously, Cory fucking Bernardi, if I had a time machine, I'd send you back in a fucking second, you piece of shit. And people call him controversial. He's not controversial. He's a fucking piece of shit. There's a difference between controversial and a fucking horrible excuse for a human. Like controversial, that's Jacqui Lambie. She's in the Palmer United Party, and she's increasingly sort of butting heads with her own boss. Now, at one point, I held out a bit of hope for her. I thought she's speaking up. I actually got annoyed with people who called themselves progressive, who criticised her for sounding like a bogan, because that's a really sort of class-based attack on someone and is really quite obnoxious. But yeah, then she sort of come across as quite willfully ignorant, saying ridiculous shit about banning the burqa, and then couldn't even articulate her position when asked. It's like one thing to be an obnoxious bigot, but when you're on TV and you know that's what they're going to ask you, and you don't even prepare so you can put a sentence together, that speaks to some pretty awful, willful ignorance. But her pet thing is the Defence Forces, because she is the Defence Force veteran herself. And she wants to stand up for the Defence Forces, who got screwed a bit, just a bit, by the government this week. It's going, oh yeah, we're not going to raise their pay to anything close to the inflation rate. So effectively, after saying, hey, let's send all our Defence Force out to conflict overseas, but effectively cut their pay at the same time. And Lambie is calling bullshit on this, and she's just come out and saying, hey, if the boss man, Clive Palmer, doesn't like it, he's going to have to throw me out of the party, which doesn't mean she's out of Parliament. It means she would be independent after that. But it's quite, see, that's controversial. bucking sort of even your small parties thing. See, that's controversial. I had someone saying to me, I'm confused. I really appreciate her doing this, but I hate the other things. Look, no, very few people are monochromatic, okay? Cory Bernardi has never done anything that makes me think he's anything but a worthless piece of shit. But the fact that I disagree with a whole bunch of Jacqui Lambie's pronouncements doesn't mean I'm going to disagree with everything she says. So, yeah, don't tie yourself in knots if someone that you disagreed with suddenly says something you agree with, or someone you usually agree with says something you disagree with. Shit happens, okay? Don't tie yourself in knots over it. There's more important things than, ooh, that person's not 100% flawless, in my opinion. Like the fact that already this is quite early in bushfire season in Australia, and South Australia has had their first catastrophic fire warning. Yes, bushfires have gotten so bad in Australia, we have a condition worse than extreme now, since some very bad fires a couple of years ago. What catastrophic means, and if you're one of the South Australians in this area, or even the lucky guys who are only just in extreme or severe areas, take major precautions. What catastrophic means is the conditions are so bad, they are saying, get the fuck out. If we're saying catastrophic tomorrow, get out today. Because catastrophic means a fire burning with such force, moving with such speed, no escape plan is feasible. You had best assume if you were in a catastrophic zone, an out of control fire that cannot be stopped is going to hit you. That's how bad things are now in Australia. This is like with the extreme storms in places that are subject to those things. You know, the old once a century events are seeming to become every other year events. And yes, most leading scientists have said this is linked to climate change, global warming. No one event is, you don't say, oh, that storm that hit New York, that's climate change. The fires in Australia, that fire there was caused by climate change. But the pattern with more extremes, longer extreme periods for bushfire in Australia, that is indicative of climate change, and it's becoming increasingly accepted by scientists. Extreme weather is the new normal. Destructive forces, killing lots of people, causing billions of dollars in damage. That's the new normal, and we may even be too late to turn this around. But try telling that to Australia's Environment Minister, Greg Hunt. Seriously, try, because the Bureau of Meteorology tried. This happened just last month. On the 3rd of October, the Bureau of Meteorology told him it's now increasingly established by science around the world, climate change is responsible for these new extremities in Australia's bushfire season. The increase and the severity of the bushfires is climate change in evidence. And just a few weeks later, he was interviewed by the BBC and he said, no, it's not, no, climate change, no. And you know what his excuse was? He looked it up on Wikipedia. The actual people, the most qualified people in the world to tell him about Australia's weather patterns, the Australian Bureau of Meteorology said, it's a problem. And he goes, well, Wikipedia tells me it's not a problem. Well, dude, you want to see some of the things I put in your entry on Wikipedia? If Wikipedia is true, I have no idea how you're allowed near farmyard animals anymore. That's all I'm saying, okay? This is idiocy. This is like one of the most critical issues in the world. And everyone who actually knows is going, yay, evidence, decades and decades of study, evidence, virtually no contradictory evidence, and fuckwits who use their conservative politics as their excuse. Look, and I get, no one wants hippies to tell them what to do. I get that's annoying, but you've got to ignore the hippies and listen to the scientists. And it's like, it was bad enough when Australia and Canada were forming this axis of fuckwits, but now with the midterm elections in the US and the Republicans being in control of nearly everything, I read this guy, Senator Inhofe, who's a climate change denier, as probably going to be in charge of one of the most important environment committees. See, I get, look, opinions. I don't give a fuck about your opinion, okay? You can have your opinion, but for you to control policy and completely contradict reality is an absolute existential threat to everyone.